So again, welcome and good morning, everyone. Again, it's nice, lovely to see. Again, as usual, we will start with a short mindful breathing exercise so that we can bring our mind in the moment, in present, so we can kind of learn to bring our mind in the moment, present, and to quiet our mind. Okay? So let yourself make comfortable. And relax as much as you can. And feel the weight of your body on cushion, chair. And feel the surrounding and try to be aware. And as you breathe in and out naturally, observe mindfully and be aware of that. When you are breathing in, watching and observing and being aware you are breathing in. When you breathe out, observing it mindfully and being aware. So simply just observing and being aware at the moment with the breath. If you notice your mind is being distracted by different thoughts, whatever, recognize that, be aware of that, and bring back your mind to the breath. You can always come back to the breath. Then we can try to have a good intentions for being here. And we can think a lot of time we suffer in our life and become very unhappy, dissatisfied, mainly because of our own mind, because our mind, own emotions. Due to our mind being disturbed and agitated by different emotions. Therefore, if we learn the tools, technique, meditations to reduce those negative thoughts that disturb and agitate, we will be able to find more peace, more calmness, more happiness in our life. So it's more about changing our own mind than changing external conditions. Transforming our own mind. And if our mind isn't better, situations more positive, more calm, more happiness, we can also be more help and benefit to others. Therefore, it is quite important to pay attention to our mind, our thoughts, emotions. Trying to reduce and minimize which are harmful, and trying to cultivate and improve those which are helpful and beneficial. And one can do that through certain meditation technique practices. And for that, we have to study, learn about those different practice meditations. And not only learn, trying to integrate and apply into the practice what we have learned. And for that reason that we have come here together to listen, maybe to learn something, or even we learn anything new things, to be reminded and hopefully may inspire, encourage to practice. May our coming here together to listen, to engage in discussions, reflection, contemplations, may all these become cause and conditions to achieve our highest potential, the fully awakened state. So we can be greatest help, benefit to oneself and to all other beings. And may we always be helpful and beneficial to others in whatever way we can, directly, indirectly. Through three doors of our body, speech, and mind. And even we can't be much benefit, at least may we never harm and hurt others. Okay?
Taking refuge in generating bodhicitta, once in English, twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodam sogi chodam la, chanchu batu dani jatsu she. Dagi chunje hibe sonam hi, dola penje sangye dobasho. Sangye chodam sogi chodam la, chanchu batu dani jatsu she. Dagi chunje hibe sonam hi, dola penje sangye dobasho. 当节对着你说呢，到当节帮别些，当别说呢，当节我当节老家So last week, we started this new topic of topic or subjects. And the topic was what is known as 12 dependent link. And last week I started in many sutras, many different Buddha's teachings, sutras, Buddha's talk and explain about dependent arisings. How all the phenomena, how all the objects, all beings are dependent arising, interdependent, interconnected, how nothing exists independently. Whether it's beings, whether it's other phenomena, objects, things, nothing exists independently without depending on others' objects, without depending on others' factors, without depending on other conditions. Nothing can exist
independently by itself. So that has been repeated again and again in so many different sutras. And that is one of the core teachings of the Buddha, the basis, in terms of Buddha's teachings. We can take, we can kind of summarize in the view or the wisdom, and then, the actions or the conduct. So in terms of view, the Buddhist view is that everything is dependent arisings. Everything is dependent arisings. That's the view, And the wisdom understanding that view is the key to reduce and eliminate those negative emotions, what we call defilement or delusions. And based on that view, how everything's interconnected, interdependent, then, we should have then Buddha encouraged that one should follow the actions of conduct, of compassionate conduct, compassionate actions, because our existence is dependent on many other factors. Our happiness is dependent on many other factors. Our well-being, happiness is dependent on many other factors, many other conditions. None of those can be experienced or exist independently by itself without depending on others' conditions and factors. Our success, whether in our ordinary world, worldly world, or whether it's in a spiritual world, they also depend on many other factors, many other conditions. With that understanding, the view that how everything is dependent arising, on the basis of that, therefore one should try to live your life, and one should try to engage in a compassionate actions of conduct as much as possible. So that is, the view and the actions, or the view. So dependent arising is that, very, very the root of, very critical and important. And so as we talked about last week from the Rise Seedling Sutras, where the Buddha explained about the dependent arising in relation to the outer phenomena and internal phenomena. And in that, he explained how all the outer phenomena, come into existence or arises by depending on multiple cause and conditions. Not just one cause condition, but multiple cause and conditions. In the same way, the internal world or internal phenomena, the beings and experience of the beings, they are also depending on multiple cause and conditions. So as part of that explanations of cause and conditions, especially in relationship to the internal beings or the objects or the phenomena, the living beings, the sentient beings, especially within the cyclic existence of samsara, then that is where the 12 link come from. So that is the 12 link, how one cause and conditions lead to the next result, and that result acts as a cause to the next result, and that result which is the result of the previous link, act as a cause and condition for the next links. And so that is how, so in that 12 links, the Buddha explained the evolution of the samsara and, the experience of the samsara, basically, So just to go through the 12 link before we go more details, maybe I might go to the reverse instead of going, So the 12 link is aging and death, aging and death, that, which, we do not wish, but something we cannot escape, is part of samsaric life, is part of samsaric experience, so as long as, and not only, aging and death, then because of aging or death of oneself or aging or death of our loved one, beloved ones, which we don't want to see them because there's a lot of pain, suffering, losing someone who is close to you, or you don't want to separate yourself from your loved ones through death, So there is a lot of fear, worry, anxieties, a lot of pain that we go through, because of the aging of death of oneself or because of aging of death of someone around us, someone who is close to us, and he explained, why do we have to go through aging and death? Why? And all the suffering that related with that aging and death, why do we need to experience that? Why do we need to go through that? And then from the cause and condition, then he said, because we have such samsaric rebirth. As long as you have this kind of samsaric rebirth, you cannot escape that. That is part of it. So because of that samsaric rebirth, the 11 link, that such samsaric rebirth lead to such aging and death, and then all the other suffering in between, from the birth until the death, because of such rebirth, if we don't have such samsara rebirth, then maybe we will not have to experience aging and death, and all other samsara, all other suffering in between. And there is aging, and there is samsara rebirth because there is the existence of the becoming, and that is, when all the cause and conditions have come together, when all the cause and conditions have come together to produce such rebirth. The 10th link, sometimes it is translated as existence, sometimes becoming, 10. How does that, if there's no becoming, if all cause and conditions have not come gathered together, then it wouldn't produce such samsara rebirth. But when that cause and condition come together, when everything have come together, then it produces particular result. And how does that cause and condition come together? How it is, And then, because of grasping and craving, the 9 and 11 link, because of the craving and grasping, we have some kind of our karmic potential. Okay, we engage in certain actions, and when we engage certain actions, certain imprint or potential is left or imprinted within our consciousness by such actions. And that karmic potentials or karmic seed or potential is then activated at the time of death, activated by the craving and grasping. And through coming together of craving and grasping, then it activates that karmic potential. And then that's when that all the conditions are there, becoming the existence, so then, it comes through grasping's coming through the 8 link, the craving. And why does craving arises? Why does craving arises? Craving arises because of the feeling. The 12, the 7 link. We come in contact with different objects, and we experience objects, and then we experience different things. And through that, we have pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, neutral feeling, different feelings in relation to the objects or in experience. And so when we have pleasant feeling, then we have craving. We don't want to lose that pleasant feeling, that pleasant experience. We want to experience more and more of that. You don't want, so we have craving because, you have that, due to that pleasant feelings, that you want to experience again and again, more and more, and you don't want to lose it. Or when we are unpleasant feeling, we have craving to separate from that unpleasant feeling. We have craving for separate or be distant from that unpleasant feeling, craving to get rid of that unpleasant feelings. So due to such craving, then it leads to grasping, and that craving comes from that such feelings. Okay, especially it is in terms of for sentient beings who have not overcome the cravings, who still have the potential of that cravings. And how does that feeling arises? The feeling, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feeling, it arises because of the contact with the objects. So the 6th link, there's the objects, let's say, let's say these flowers, there's objects, and you have eye sense consciousness, and something that in between the object and eye sense consciousness, there is eye sense faculties, and when all these 3 come together, when all 3 aggregates, then your eye consciousness contact this flower through the eye sense faculties. And when your consciousness, eye sense consciousness, come in contact with the flowers, Then you distinguish, oh, this is a nice flower, beautiful flower, whatever your flowers. On the basis of that, then you feel is pleasant feelings, or when we distinguish this as a nice, beautiful, whatever, then we experience more pleasant feeling in relation to that object. And your mind distinguish this as a ugly, unbeautiful, bad, whatever, negative. Then through contact with that, then you experience unpleasant feeling and experience. So that feeling comes through because of contact between the consciousness and the objects. How does that contact come? How does contact arises? The contact arises through the sense faculties. It's like a microscope that you look at small objects, that you cannot see with your naked eye. And in order to see it, small cells or whatever, you look from that microscope that we can see. Similarly, the consciousness is able to contact the objects through the support of sense faculties. And so that contact arises from the 6 sense faculties. There is a development of the sense faculties, and having those sense faculties develop over the time, then the consciousness is able to contact the objects through those sense faculties. So the 6th is contact, the 5th is the sense faculty. And how does sense faculties develop, or how does the sense faculty arises? And because of name and form. And name and form is when, in terms of rebirth or birth in the womb, from the mother's womb, during the conceptions, the moment we have the conceptions, when the consciousness enter the embryo, when the sperm and eggs, the moment that then the name and form is. So name here form here referred in the physical form. So at that moment when the conception happened, so it is the embryo, And then name here refer to the other mental aggregates, the aggregate of feeling, discriminations, compositional factor, and consciousness. So once there is established of name and form, then over the time, your sense faculties started to develop. Days, weeks, months, your eye sense faculty, hearing sense faculty, smelling, nose sense faculty, tasting, tongue sense faculty, the faculty to feel your body, and then mental faculties. So those will develop over the time. And once you develop those sense faculty, then the consciousness is able to contact the object through sense faculty. And that sense faculty is able to develop over the time through that coming together of the name and form, that is the consciousness entering the, sperm and eggs from the embryo, And how does that conceptions happen? How is that conception? Where does that conceptions comes? The name and form, is come through the third. So that name and form is the fourth link, and third link is the link of consciousness. And that means, there is a consciousness that carry the karmic imprint or the potentials through our actions. And that karmic potential or seed, when it is activated by certain other cause and conditions, then it produces the conceptions. Then it enter the consciousness into the sperm and eggs, and through that name and form is produced. So if there is no karmic potential or karmic seed within that consciousness, then it will not be able to produce the name and form, the conceptions. But because of that particular karmic seed, karmic potential, then that is why. And how is that karmic seed or potential in the consciousness being implanted or because of actions? The second link, we engage in compulsional action. We create certain actions through body, speech, and mind. Sometimes through our physical actions, behavior, sometimes through our speech, whether we are with a kind, gentle speech or whether with a harsh speech, whether it's a truthful, honest speech or untruthful, lying speech, we create actions, karmic seed through such actions in terms of speech, in terms of our physical action, physical behavior, whether it's a harmful behavior or whether it's a helpful behavior, or mental, actions, whether we have a negative mental attitude or positive mental attitude. Due to any of those, then we create certain. So through any of three doors, we create what you call actions or karma. We engage in actions. And when you engage in such actions, with that karmic actions, then the moment we engage in any of action, positive or negative, either through one of those three doors or two of three doors or three of three doors, the moment we engage in that action, that very moment, it leaves certain imprint, certain potential from that actions. And that is what we call karmic potential, karmic seed, that is left or imprinted within the consciousness. So that potential in that consciousness, the consciousness that carried that potential or imprint, because that was imprinted or planted in that consciousness by certain actions. And that is the second link, the actions. And then we create certain actions, whether it's positive or negative, contaminated, positive or negative, because of ignorance. Because of ignorance. So the first link is the ignorance. Due to the ignorance, fundamental ignorance, then, other afflicted emotions, delusion arises, anger arises, hatred, resentment, grudges, or craving, attachments, jealousy, pride, impatience. So those different negative feelings, emotions arises. And due to arising one of those negative emotions, then we engage into certain actions. We create a karmic, we engage certain actions, and through that we create a karmic seed, create karmic. And so all these different afflicted emotions arises that make us to engage in certain actions due to that fundamental ignorance. So that is the first link, the fundamental ignorance. So that is 12 link. So you can see where it starts. It starts from the ignorance. So I came the reverse way, and then if you go same, ignorance produce the actions, action produce through the action you imprint the potential of that action into the consciousness, and through that consciousness, that potential being activated, then you have the conceptions, and through the conceptions, then name and form, and then over the time, then sense faculties are developed, and when all the sense faculties are fully developed, then your consciousness is able to contact the objects, and when you come into contact with the object, then you have the feelings, and due to the feelings, then you start to feel craving, and due to craving, stronger cravings, then it becomes grasping. As craving become more stronger and intense, and through the craving and grasping, then the karmic action fully activated and ready to produce next rebirth. And so it becomes becoming, and then from that, then there's next rebirth, and because of that samsara rebirth, then there is aging and death and all other sufferings. So that is the kind of 12 link. Again, with that we see it's depending on one cause condition leading to the next, and that leading to next and next. So now going a little bit more detail with each of them, starting with the first link, ignorance. When we talk about ignorance can be understood a mind that is not aware or not understanding of something. And so, that is one, not knowing, not fully aware or not knowing is an ignorance. And of course, we can have millions of ignorance, not knowing so many things. But here we are talking about very specific ignorance, and that is why we call fundamental ignorance, because all ignorance are not all the ignorance can lead us into samsara rebirth or 12 link, And so we are speaking about very specific ignorance. And within the ignorance, there's two types. One is not knowing, and then one is actually misperceiving, misapprehending, misconcepting. That is even worse than not knowing. Do you get it? Not knowing and actually misconceiving the reality. Okay? It's more stronger. So here we are talking about more of that, the misconceptions or misapprehending the reality. It's not only not knowing. I might not be knowing what this flower is. That is one level of ignorance. Then actually to think these are totally different things and perceiving it as totally different things is even more stronger ignorance. And here, when we talk about fundamental ignorance, we are talking about, ignoring that is misapprehending or misconceiving the reality. In relation to that, there are mainly two fundamental ignorance we can talk about in relation to the fueling ignorance. One is the ignorance of law of cause and effect, and one is ignorance of, ultimate reality of self and all other phenomena. In one of the sutras, Buddha explained, what is the ignorance? Then in that sutra, Buddha said the ignorance is misperceiving or not understanding the truth of suffering. The ignorance that what is not perceiving, not understanding, or misperceiving the truth of origin. The ignorance that is not understanding and misperceiving the truth of cessation and the truth of path. Or so in other words, is ignorance is that misperceiving, not understanding, and misperceiving the Four Noble Truth, which is out of law of cause and effect. As we mentioned last week, Four Noble Truth is law of cause and effect. Law of cause and effect, how we get into samsara, and law of cause and effect, how we can get out of samsara. The first truth is explaining law of cause and effect. Due to certain cause, certain actions, and certain negative emotions, then you have the result, the suffering. On the other hand, when you engage in a certain path or practice, such as Four Noble Truth, then you have different results, cessation from the sufferings, freedom from the sufferings. So it is, when you engage in certain particular cause and conditions, it leads to certain results, such as suffering. On the other hand, when you engage in certain different cause and conditions, then not only it doesn't lead to the suffering, but it leads freedom from the sufferings. So anyway, there is the ignorance of karma or law of cause and effect. Sometimes it is known as, in Buddhist scriptures, sometimes you see term like that. In the view, they talk about two views. Worldly view and the view beyond the worldly. And when we talk about worldly view, right view, there are two kinds of right view. And so the term they use is worldly right view and beyond worldly right view. And when they talk about worldly right view, then that is the view of law of cause and effect, the view of karma. And when you see the term beyond the worldly right view, then it's referring to the right view of emptiness, dependent arisings, emptiness, how the ultimate reality. So you can see in right view, you see many of the teachings, you see, within the right view, sometimes you see two different. And so the ignorance of those right views on two different levels. I think it is in the Right Sitting Sutra, where it is the ignorance described, being ignorant of the impermanent, ignorant of dependent arisings, ignorance of the self, So there is, the ignorance of four Dharma seals, and which, again, even though all conditioned phenomena are nature impermanent, ever-changing, transitory, if we look any conditioned objects, any conditioned phenomena, nothing lasts forever. Not only nothing lasts, it's changing every moment on subtle level. Is moving and changing every moment. It's transitory, Even though that is the case, even though that is a reality, due to not understanding it or even misperceiving it, then we hold and grasp to be permanent. And that grasping of permanent then lead to many other negative emotions. Many negative emotions. Due to not understanding transitory nature of the objects. When you have attachment, our attachment intensify. Our attachment lasts long when you don't understand transitory nature of that object of attachment. On the other hand, when you have some kind of anger or bad feeling towards something, when you don't understand the transitory nature of that, and when there is sense of grasping of permanent, then we have stronger negative feelings. Just small example. If you have someone you dislike, you feel, whether you call enemy or not, the more you have sense of grasping permanent that he or she is going to be harmful person, bad person, the longer and he or she will harm you and do something bad to you, the more your anger will be more intense, more stronger. But if you're not transitory in nature, even though he or she act this way, or he or she seems that he or she is changing, he or she will not be same. It will be much more easier to let it go and not to hold very strongly that feelings. So that is one, just to give a small example. That is, not understanding, but actually clinging and grasping as a permanent is one of the reason why we suffer. So ignorant of that. The others, even though contaminated, feeling are in the nature of samsara, but not understanding all these contaminated experience in the nature of suffering, we misperceive certain contaminated experience to be true happiness. And that misleading, then we get attached to that. And then, we run after such experience, such pleasure. And then, at the end, then we end up disappointed and unhappy. But if we understand all these contaminated experience, even pleasant ones, as long as they are contaminated, they are not nature of true happiness, but actually in the nature of suffering, then you don't get attached to that. If you don't get attached to that, then you don't get disappointed. Then you don't have to suffer by being disappointed. But for us, we suffer so much because we get disappointed all the time with different objects, with different experience, with different peoples all the time. Disappointed because, we have certain expectations, certain hope and expectations that are driven by, yeah. So, misunderstanding or misperceptions, believing, so that, and then, even though all phenomena are in the nature of selflessness and emptiness, but not understanding, instead misperceiving to have a, inherently existing self and inherently existing phenomena, inherently existing my body, my mind, and my experience, and so forth. Then due to that, again, that is a fundamental ignorance that gives rise to all other delusions. So those are the main ignorance, and especially the fundamental ignorance of not only not understanding, but misperceiving the self to be inherent existence, and all other phenomena, including your body, mind, experience, and everything to exist inherently. And that is the fundamental ignorance. That's the root of all the afflicted emotions. And that is the root of all the contaminated actions. In relation to that, because in the this one, there isn't very detailed text on 12 link, but you find description of 12 link very short in different within the different Lambrim and different others. So in terms of, as I mentioned, in terms of the sutras, Buddha's own teachings, you can see in the Rise 16 Sutras, one of sources for that. In the earlier Indian writings, Nagarjuna's writing, we have shared also on the link in the material. That is again chapter 18, and from that, chapter 26. Sorry, 18. So from that, maybe I will also read a little bit. So in the first, he said, the obscuring ignorance profile one into samsaric birth. three compositional factors, so that is the second action, enhance the formations of the birth. These actions impel one into the state of microbirth. So in Nagarjuna, that is all he has here in relation to the ignorance, okay, obscuring ignorance, lead into that compositional factors that lead, second link, that give birth to the samsara. So here, when he says three compositional factors, so three kind of actions, karmic actions, meritorious action, non-meritorious action, and immovable actions. Due to the meritorious actions, then we take rebirth within the samsara, but high rebirth, such as human beings. Unmeritorious actions lead into unfortunate rebirth, such as lower rebirth, animal rebirth, and other lower rebirth. And immovable actions lead to the high rebirth due to the sudden meditative concentration of the absorptions, then lead to high rebirth within the form and formless realms. So those are three. But wherever you take rebirth within the six realms, samsara, lower or high rebirth, but still you are in samsara, you are still not free from the samsara, because still that rebirth is result of your ignorance and contaminated karma or the actions. So in terms of ignorance, due to ignorance of karma, law of cause and effect, then we create actions that throw us in the lower rebirth. Okay? Due to the ignorance of not knowing law of cause and effect or karma, you think, I can kill anyone, there will be no consequences. I can steal, there's no consequences. I can engage sexual misconduct, there's no consequences. I can tell lie, there's no consequences. I can use a harmful, harsh speech, there's no consequences. I can use divisive speech to divide the society, to divide individuals, divide different groups, different individuals. There's no consequences. I can engage into any kind of, meaningless, idle gossips, and that create a lot of problems. There's no consequences, I can have these ill will feelings, negative feelings, bad feeling towards. There's no consequence of such feelings, attitude, covetousness, feelings, wrong views, so forth. So when you don't understand how such actions has particular consequences, which is negative consequences, pain, suffering, negative rebirth, and experiences, when we don't understand, or when we actually misperceive it and seeing, there's no such consequences. On the other hand, seeing, even I try to save someone's lives, who cares, because there's no consequence of such actions. Even I try to practice generosity, there's no consequences, like that, on the virtue side. But again, from the law of cause and effect, from karmic point of view, each of all these actions have consequences. Your negative actions has negative consequences. It could be, lower rebirth. It could be suffering within the higher rebirth, suffering within the lower rebirth as well as higher rebirth. On the other hand, such as the virtuous actions, positive actions, such as saving someone's life, practicing generosity and helping, it has positive consequences. That is, could be, provide you a higher rebirth or pleasant feeling or experiences, happy experience and pleasant feeling, within the lower rebirth or within the higher rebirth, but then because we don't understand it, we don't believe it, not only we don't understand and believe it, sometimes we have misperceptions and think, such actions, we can do whatever, there's no consequences from the karmic point of view. Then, we become less mindful and careful in our actions. If we have understanding of that, we become more mindful and more careful in our actions. Because of course, we do not want sufferings. And so we don't want to engage in something that brings us suffering. And since we want happiness, then we want to engage in the cause that brings happiness. And so then we become more conscious, more careful, more mindful with our actions, verbally, physically, mentally. And through being more mindful, careful, and watchful, cautious, we try to engage in less harmful negative actions. We try to engage in more positive actions, But when we are ignorant about that, and then that is, then we engage in the more negative actions. No more harmful negative actions. And that is what we call unmeditated actions or karma. And through such unmeditated or negative actions or karma, then, when that action is completed, is full completed actions, then, it produces lower rebirth and the suffering within that. So that is because of ignorance of karma, law of cause and effect. On the other hand, we might not be our ignorance of law of cause and effect. We understand, how each and every our actions has the consequences. Each and every negative thoughts, negative speech, negative physical actions have negative consequences, whether in the form of lower rebirth or in the form of other sufferings. How each of our positive actions in terms of positive thoughts, speech, and physical action, how each of positive has positive consequences or result. That is in the form of, high rebirth, in the form of happiness within any of the 6 M's or outside of 6 M's, So then, with that understanding, with that realizations, we might be very mindful, careful, cautious of our actions. And through that, we create less negative karma, less negative actions. Instead, we create more positive actions, more positive karma. And that is meritorious actions or karma. Through such meritorious action and karma, then, we have better, higher rebirth, and then more happiness within that better, higher rebirth. But still, so with that, even though we might be able to create cause and conditions, not have so much suffering, lower rebirth and so much suffering, but within a higher rebirth, but still within the samsara. Because even when you are engaged in the virtues, still, if we have not understood or realized the ultimate truth, still we are ignorant of the ultimate truth. And due to that, even when you engage in the positive actions, there is a grasping of truly existing me who is engaged in these positive actions, which is all the truly existing positive actions. There's still, we are engaged in positive actions, but still there is a grasping of you who's creating that as a truly existence, the action itself as truly existing, and the objects of, that action as truly existing. And because of that is that ignorance, that truly grasping, even though there's no inherent existing self, no inherent existing object, no inherent existing virtues, no inherent existing the act of creating that virtues, but due to ignorance, there is a grasping. Even though we are engaging in something virtuous, but still there's a grasping due to that ignorance. And because of that, the result is still better results, but within the samsara. The result is more happy result, better result, but still is within the samsara. It still produces, samsara rebirth instead of freedom from the samsara. And so that is because of that fundamental ignorance. And so that fundamental ignorance involves, whether in the virtuous actions or non-virtuous actions, as long as we have not understood the ultimate reality, the emptiness. So that is the fundamental ignorance. So due to the ignorance of ultimate reality, then we create action, karmic action to be born, either in lower rebirth or higher rebirth, but within the samsara. And due to that fundamental ignorance, and including the ignorance of law of cause and effect karma, then we engage in non-virtuous actions, and through that, then we create a cause and condition to be born in a lower rebirth. So so I think maybe today I will just end here. Any questions? Please feel free. You don't have to be shy or feel your questions sound like silly. No question is silly. Any questions from the Zoom as well?
Zoom has Lorna, and she says, regarding a higher rebirth in samsara, is a human rebirth higher than a demigod or God because we can't attain enlightenment in the God and demigod realms, but we can in the human realm?
I guess it depends on to whom we ask. If we ask the God, they will say there is better. If we ask the demigod, they will say there is better. But me being a human will say, human is better. Just a joke apart. But it is also true. We might have different perception about that. But from generally speaking, of course, there is less suffering in God realms than human realms in terms of suffering itself. Okay? And within the God realm, there are many different kinds of God realms, just like human beings, desired God realm, form God realm, formless God realm. And within the, so anyway, so there is less sufferings, and in some certain God realm, there's no really suffering of pain or not even suffering of change, So from that perspective, they have less suffering, definitely. But in terms of the opportunity to practice the Dharma, human being has better opportunity. And if you are looking from the opportunity to practice the Dharma, opportunity to engage in your spiritual path, opportunity for your growth in your spiritual path, then human is better and the best for different reasons. So from that point of view, from the opportunity to practice the path, to practice the Dharma, the human realms is higher. Not necessarily because human has less suffering and compared to some of the God. Okay, yeah, that would be my answer.
Hi, this is Karen. Thank you for today. That was quite interesting. It's a difficult subject. In the last 20, 30 years in physics, there's been so many discoveries in terms of the essential building blocks of the universe. Muons, quarks, now gravitational waves, they're trying to unpack. Where do these things fit into dependent arising? Would you say that it's just that the cause and effects of these essentials just hasn't been discovered yet by us scientifically?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, there has been a lot of things existed, and in the past they have not been discovered by the science. So many things. Even the what you call the flexity of the brain is something that they found in recently. That how you can change your brain through your meditation and practice. In the past, it used to be it's not possible. It's the brain who is directing everything. But now they have found, and so there is more and more finding in many different fields, and so even though there have been those cause and conditions, subtle level of cause and conditions, maybe with a better technology, we are able to discover more subtle and more better functioning of certain things. Yeah, that would be. Any? Yes.
Morning.
Morning.
Can feel ignorance inside myself and my actions and try to correct that. But how do you feel about, in relation, thinking the other person is acting ignorantly and showing compassion, but can we make that a judgment that, somebody else is being ignorant? Or can we only do it in ourselves?
I think when we talk about someone acting out of ignorance, I think there are two ways of looking at it, one positively and one negatively. There is one sense of someone acting out of ignorance, in a sense, putting them down some way. You know, I'm not ignorance. That person's ignorance. You know, there is a sense of looking down. You are stupid. Basically, indirectly, that is how, some way, it is a little bit more gross, but that is what it feels. That is negative. Better not to think that way. But of course, we are ordinary beings, human. Those thoughts comes, and try to be aware of that and try to change it, you know, thinking maybe he or she is not ignorance. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe I could be ignorance, you know. Even though it feel like, even though it sound, even though it look like, even though it feel like he or she is ignorance, and I'm not ignorance, but it could be the opposite. Throughout the history, a lot of things that thought it was a truth, a certain century or certain decades have been proved to be scientifically or historically proved that that was not true. And change in history, understanding of the history, you know, and same in physics and like that in everything. Same way, you know, in our own experience, sometimes we proved that we're wrong and other was right. Even in that moment, we felt like we were right and they were wrong, and we felt like we knew the situation, they were ignorant. You know, so with that all background, with all this experience and background, we try to remind ourselves, well, that is how it seems, that is how I feel, but always being open, you know, open and flexibility, you know, that I could be wrong and I could be the ignorant and there could be the right one. I think to have that state of mind is very important, to open that I could be wrong, you know, and I could be the one who is ignorant. Even though that is not how I feel, even though that is not how it looks or seems like with all the evidence, with everything what we might have. But again, you know, that is one. I think. Secondly, sometimes it can be helpful in a way, not in such a negative relationship, but when we see someone acting very cruel, mean way to anyone, and when we started feeling angry, upset with that person because that person's such a harmful, mean, cruel actions, you know, sometimes we feel upset, angry, agitated by such behavior and such actions towards that person. In such cases, sometimes by thinking, oh, that person is not acting that way because he or she has total control, but because he or she is being under control by their own delusions, which are controlled by their own afflicted, the ignorance. So that from that perspective, instead of blaming the person, we blame their negative emotions, the anger, the attachment, the ignorance. In that way, then it's positive. It's not looking down, but it's trying to let go of anger toward that person by not blaming for that person for such behavior and action, but actually blaming their negative emotions, such as ignorance. So in that cases, it can be a, you can look at differently in different situations dealing with different emotions. So that's it. Yes, yeah. Okay.
You remind me of something that you said a few Wednesdays ago, where like when you're engaging with somebody, the first thing feel equal with them, right? Look at your own self-grasping, and don't treat it as it's only that person. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Yes, here, Adam.
Make a comment, Geshe, that the second way of looking at somebody else's ignorance has been really key for me to increasing compassion. I think it's a really important part of compassion.
Yeah. I think Aryadeva, Nagarjuna's main disciples, in his 400 verses, that is also where he talk about that practice, where he says that Buddha's advice or Buddha's teachings, what Buddha said is, not to get upset and angry to the persons for their actions, but actually blaming their emotions, their negative emotions. And through that, then, we let go of any negative feelings toward the persons. Instead, we feel compassion, as you said, because we understand that that person is a prisoner and slave of their own delusions. Not only that person, including ourselves, but just to understand that person is behaving or acting that way because they have no control, but because they are being controlled by some other energy, which is their own afflicted emotions, delusions. And so in that way, they are the slave of those delusions. They are the prisoner of their own delusions. And by understanding, someone being slave and a prisoner of something or some other energies, then you can feel compassion for that. Easy to feel compassion. Okay.
One more on Zoom. Lorna says, thank you, Geshe, for your answer. And Al's question is, how can I build confidence that craving is not necessary?
Craving is not necessary. Maybe I also need that answer myself too. I think really giving enough. I think, we have received so many teachings, about craving, attachment, how attachment, craving is source of disappointment, unhappiness, dissatisfaction, so many, and how that craving, attachment give rise to jealousy, that give rise to anger and so many other things, I think. But sometimes maybe we don't spend enough time to really feel that. We have heard so much, we have read so much, but we haven't gone deep enough to really feel that was really 100% so. And so that is mean more contemplation, meditations, bringing our own experience, especially maybe dealing with something that we have a strong craving, strong attachment at different time in our life. Of course, sometimes we have small craving and small attachment. That is not a big problem, like still it is better if we don't have, and we should overcome it, but sometimes it's not a big problem in our life, But there are certain things, due to strong craving and attachment, that has led to a lot of pain, a lot of sufferings in relationship, in others, in many other things, Sometimes, strong attachment and craving to certain positions, put some in the fight and bad relationship with others, whether sometimes they're friends, colleagues, or some others, competing and trying to outdo each others, and so many different things because of strong craving and attachment, that positions. Or for, it could be many other things, And that has been very, very, painful. And because not only such a relationship, then, we get so much hurt when we don't get them, when we are unable to do, we feel so disappointed. So, so miserable. We feel like either we failed ourselves, we are incapable. I must be very bad not to get that positions, not to get that job. I must be so bad. I'm incapable, not be able to hold that relationship, and someone left me, or we feel so bad about ourselves, or we totally blame the other persons and feel so much anger and either way, we suffer so much. Whether you blame yourself, feel, so, having no confidence in yourself and feeling, you are incapable or whatever, or blaming others and through that so much. So, and so bringing those experiences and then trying to look really, if you go deeper, of course, on superficial level, on surface, there are many causes and conditions that lead to that experience, that lead to that situation. But if you go deeper and deeper, not just only looking for the superficial surface cause and condition, go deeper and deeper and then try to see, is your craving, attachment involved in that or not? Is it really because of your attachment? Is it really for your craving? That is why it became like that way, the way it turned out. If one didn't have the craving and attachment, even with the other cause and condition, would it end up that way? Would you feel so miserable? Will you feel so disappointed? Will you feel so unhappy? Even with all other cause and condition being there. And so really giving time and really deep looking downly, and then maybe if we do then, and then if we are able to understand that, then maybe we will be able to see, definitely such craving and attachments are very harmful, and cause of real suffering, cause of miserable, and when we don't do that, otherwise we don't see, how it is caused miserable, unhappy, and then even the subtle, being attached to food, for example, or being attached to a certain weather, for example, even though it's not a big problem, but still it has same kind of nature in the way that is. And so therefore also, even though it's not a big problem, but still it's better not to have that. And then we will try to work to get rid of them. But I think to really understand, so I think it requires deep investigation, analyzing, meditations, to have a more profound understanding, to have more profound, deep understanding how that attachment and craving is better, one of the main root of our suffering and problem. So I think maybe that will be one of the way to do. Okay. So yeah, we can do the final dedications.
From Master Shantideva. May all beings everywhere, plagued by the sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with the mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, Those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be free. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.